Today on Rates and Barrels, we discuss a new pitch pairing tool available at FanGraphs and what we can learn from using it. And we dig into a story by Ben Lindbergh wondering how much information on the field is too much. Let's go. Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, April 9th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May here with you on this episode. We've got a lot of ground to cover thanks to a new tool we've stumbled into over at FanGraphs. It's called a pitch pairing tool. We'll dig into how we think that could be useful here in just a few minutes. A little bit of baseball news we should talk about off the top. We saw Cole Ragans get hit by a comebacker, caught him in the glove, and then it caught him in the pitching hand thumb, Trevor. The weird thing that happened here is he tried to stay in. The first pitch he threw after he got hit, kind of the test pitch, he sailed over the catcher. And at that point, I thought, he's coming out. Nope. They left him in, walked the guy on 4 pitches, then came out of the game, which is tough on the guy that replaced him because he had a lot less time to get ready. I guess the main question I have for you here is, even though the Royals are trying to insist that Ragans is going to be good to go for his next start, that seems pretty sketchy based on what we know right now, which is very little, right? I mean, you get hit by a comebacker like that, I imagine your thumb is going to be pretty swollen and pretty messed up for a little while.
Yeah, it depends on what actually happened. I'm sure they got imaging done, and if there's no break, then there's nothing really to be super concerned about. But and also him thinking that he can continue, especially if you're like, okay, I can grip the ball, like there's not a lot more pain when I'm gripping. You're like assuming it's like when you get a raspberry or something, or you slide in hard a second, you just need a second to like get your leg go. Like you're like, oh, this will just kind of level out. But it's grip related. So like it's probably he just couldn't grip the ball as strongly as he wanted to. So I wouldn't amount of pressure that could go from painting a fastball versus sailing one is really low. And so it could just be that the sting didn't go away very fast and he's going to be bruised up pretty good. And maybe there is some swelling. And if that's the case, then the ball will feel different in your hand. The ball feels different in your hand. It's going to be hard to throw the ball where you want it. But if there's no break and there's imaging done and they're not worried about anything being torn or there's no like acute pain anywhere, then there's nothing to tell me that he wouldn't be okay for this start. It's one of those things like it might look. If you can't grip the ball, it's gonna look really bad. It's gonna look like something's really wrong with you, even if it's not. And it's when it comes to the hand, like it's weird. Pitchers we don't really care about our hand as much as we care about like our arm. So it's like you can get through a lot more stuff, blisters and like little things like that, rather than like if your arm hurts. So I think that's what probably is what's going on. But I hope I'm not just completely wrong here in 4 days.
I mean, that's my instinct as well, but I'm also wondering, like, why is Nick Lodolo, why is there no news about him? He's just got quote-unquote blisters, and, it's taken forever for him to come back. I guess maybe that's a recurring injury where you're just like, man, there must be something about how I'm gripping the ball. It's like keeps coming back. That might be more worrisome. With this, it's a one-time thing. It leads more credence to my theory about command, because if you look at his stuff before and after the injury, or over the course of the season, his stuff is there. The velo is there. The velo was there when he came back. And I think that's why Trevor is talking about the hand not being as important, because he was still imparting the same velocity on the ball. He's still imparting the same shapes on the ball. He was still doing all the big stuff. The hand is the last thing that kind of goes through. So, I could think that he might think he's fine. I do worry though. Like the one thing that I worry about in terms of command is that it's so finicky, so that, my general theory in command is like the smaller issues that lead to bad command. If you look at Ragans this year, the stuff has been there in every start. The command has not. It's been very start to start. So, the statistical answer is don't worry about it. Small sample command doesn't matter. He'll be fine. If he's not fine in the next start, he'll be fine in the start after that. I also don't think there's anything you can do in fantasy or that really the Royals can do, because they don't really have anybody in their organization that has the same upside as Cole Ragans. They got to run him out there if they can.
Yeah, the second start of the year looked like the Ragans we were all expecting. He went 6, 1 unearned run, 8 Ks, 1 walk. He still somehow lost that game, but, tough breaks on that front. wins are always elusive for us in fantasy. So glad to hear encouraging analysis, I guess, with Ragans as someone who is believing he can have that completely healthy season and be among the candidates for the AL Cy Young Award this year. Let's dig into this new pitch pairing tool over at FanGraphs. So FanGraphs has this section, FanGraphs Labs, a lot of stuff in there. Haven't had a lot of time to dig into it, but the pitch pairing tool in particular is a visualization that allows you to choose an anchor pitch, plot it anywhere in or around the strike zone, and then you can see how everything else moves off of that. So in my mind, this is a tunneling visualization. So we were playing around with that a little bit during our meeting, and I guess the first question I have for you, Trevor, is how do you think people who are playing fantasy or just trying to understand more about pitching should use a tool like this?
It's interesting because you can kind of intuit what a pitcher is trying to do. I actually there was something that I think was, it was like a visualization tool that Driveline made in 2021 or something, where you could watch, you could add in the spin of the ball and the speed, and then it could like kind of put it through a physics engine to like tell you how the pitches will move off each other or when they'll deviate from the path, and then show you where they'll end up. And I used that to determine where I wanted my target. I was trying to choose a single target and trying to figure out where that single target was to get my pitches to go to the places that I want them to go most often. So like that is what this is for. So the assumption is not only the anchor pitch is like where you would assume your fastball, your straight one, is where the target is, or you're trying to throw that to. So like imagine that's where the catcher is giving you a target. And then you're assuming that it's released out of the same spot every time. Like you're not changing anything in your hand position. That in terms of fantasy, like you can go watch a guy, see maybe where the catcher, rays are a great way to do this with if you want to test it. But just go watch where the catcher's set up, set that as your anchor point, and then see how these guys' pitches move. A guy who's going to keep getting better as his command gets better. Joe Boyle does this. Like he's a guy to pay attention to, because his command is still one of the worst in the league, but like somehow still incrementally improving, but tremendous stuff. So like you can go find diamonds in the rough, guys who either have this figured out where they're consistently throwing off this tunnel, they're throwing a lot of strikes and it's going to be effective, or guys who don't. Like clearly are not picking a spot and clearly not tunneling their stuff off. They might not just know what they're trying to do here. That might be helpful in like figuring out where a guy is in the progression, because at the end of the day, like if people commit to this, and we're going to talk about a few examples, some pitchers that have, whether inadvertently committed to something like this, like maybe not doing this visualization, but like the way they think, and are having success, like it is something that'll make you successful. Even if you're not a guy who like tunnels super well, it'll still give you an idea of where your pitch is going to go, when you're aiming certain places, and that's going to give you better command just by its nature. It's how your brain is developing intent. So you can go watch guys pitch, see like if they use this tool, where would they be putting their point at, and maybe, and if you listen to this show all the time, maybe you're pretty good at being like, this tunnel might work better. This tunnel is probably the best version of them. If that's what you believe, then you go look and see if that's what they're doing. Maybe that'll help you make a fantasy decision. That's how I would use it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to use it to, look at tunneling between secondary pitches. So for, the purposes of a lot of these stuff models, you have their fastball group, and then you have their secondary groups that are sort of defined off that fastball group. And that's the idea that everything tunnels off the fastball. But I think in today's game, hitters are anticipating different pitches and different counts. And so you can start to play secondaries off each other. We talked about this last year with Trevor Rogers, but, I'm looking at a picture right now. I'll send you guys this. Check this out. This is Joey Cantillo's slider. I'm using the slider as the anchor pitch against righties. And you can see that if they think they're getting the slider, low and in, like basically back-footed from Joey Cantillo, and instead they get the curveball is going to be in the dirt, So that's coming with the same spin axis. in the same direction, and he's actually added 11 inches of drop to his slider this year, Cantillo has. I think it is to make it look more like the curveball. So now he's got this slider that looks like the curveball, but the curveball drops another 10 inches further. So it's, and then you can look at where they actually throw these things, and it's like, oh, he throws a lot of high sliders and curveballs. Why would he do that? Well, in the context of this tool, if you move the anchor up on the slider, he could throw a high slider, and if it's the curveball, it's low and still in the zone, right? So you're basically playing around with, I think, swing and miss patterns. So you feel like if this is a swinging count, he can throw this, it looks like this, boom. If it's a take count, you start to think about like, oh, if he's not going to swing at this high slider because he thinks it's above the zone, oh, well, the curveball will drop into the zone. So he took a called strike. So you can start to see how pitchers might, tunnel their secondaries, and how Joey Cantillo's slider, by the way, bad stuff plus. It doesn't like that shape. But that shape is more like this curveball, and it might give him something he can really pair off each other. It's something I wrote about in my piece for Friday, which is that Chris Bubich plays the slider and the changeup off each other. Trevor Rogers plays the sweeper and the changeup off each other. And I think Cantillo this year has a fastball changeup pairing that it's a straight change and has less movement this year. So that's a pairing. And then he's actually tunneling the slider and curveball off each other. So that's an interesting way to play around with this tool.
Ask Trevor about a phrase we've heard in baseball for a long time, and I think Trevor probably heard it a lot from coaches at a lot of different levels: establish the fastball. I think that was something that was probably said to a lot of us when we were kids, and it permeated probably all the way up into the big leagues, right? I mean, you heard that from big league coaches, but what does that expression actually mean now in 2026? And what do you think it meant when coaches were saying it to you when you were a lot younger?
I think it's a pretty, there's a lot of different things that can mean in context. And the best coaches I ever had were good at like putting it into context and telling you what they mean after. And the worst coaches were the ones that just said it all the time, constantly, and then gave you like that means throw this pitch here. Like that's not helpful at all. So what it used to mean, and I think like the reason it still has value or it's so important still now is because the assumption is it said a lot to guys who are developing, and the reasoning given there would always be like, you have to be able to get people out with your fastball, pitch to contact. That was all kind of stuff that like, duh. Like I was always like, yeah, that's not telling me how. You're just telling me what to do. Like I know that's the goal. And the big assumption is if you can't command your fastball, you definitely won't be able to command your off-speed pitches. And I think there's some reality in generally that is generally true. When it moves the least, it's the easiest to predict its movement. Like those things all are true. And so it'd be like command your fastball, learn to command your fastball first, and then develop everything after that. That was the common thinking. That's the thing that's changed a lot, right? So it came down to which pitch can you command and throw where you wanted to go. And so it was establishing that you could command that fastball, not only just in the game, but like in your own career. Like you need to be able to do that. So we need to establish fastball. That's when I heard it the most. Now, I think establishing the fastball, it means several things. If you're using it, one, it's the number one pitch for tunneling off of. So if you establish your fastball, you're establishing your tunnel. If you might be establishing your fastball, showing people that if you are a heavy breaking ball guy, Sergio Romo, for example, you still have to throw some fastballs. That has to be in their head, right? So that would, for him, establishing fastball means throw it a couple times so they think you'll throw it at some point. But for another guy, for like me, I would need to establish that I'm going to attack guys with my fastball, meaning I'm going to go for swings and misses and strikeouts with my fastball so that I then can get them with my other pitches because they're not expecting it as much. That would be establishing the fastball for me. So like that is kind of how I think the coaching has gotten better and explained it better in that way. But right now, I think the majority of it its usage is used for establish that tunnel so that you can use your best pitches off of it, whether or not it's putting that seed in their mind so they can't eliminate it from your arsenal, because you always want to have all your pitches in play as much as possible to every hitter. That's the dream. Everyone thinks that everything can come at any time. That is the dream. And then it also means like when you develop, you need to be able to throw your fastball wherever you want because it is the most predictable pitch for yourself. Might be for the hitter, but when you need a strike, you got to be able to throw your fastball over the plate, which remains to be true. So it could mean any of those things. For me, I always took it as throw that four seam down and away, which is the one that got absolutely crushed all the time. And I would constantly miss middle because that's how I naturally missed. Once I devoted myself to throwing in the top rail of the zone, that's when I unlocked and became good. That's where all my swing and miss. I struck out tons of guys in the minors. As soon as I figured that's what establishing fastball should have been for me. But I was told up until like my second year in the big leagues that it was still down and away, down and away, down and away. And that's just not where my fastball was most successful. So I was always trying to find other things to hide it when it was my best pitch. So that is my complicated history with that term, with that phrase. But I think it still has value. It just you got to be able to isolate the context for the guy you're talking to.
And the thinking of you throwing your fastball down in the minds of your old coaches was probably what? Just pound the ball on the ground, they'll hit a ground ball,
pitch to contact, let them get themselves out, which they had a point. I did tend to hunt the strikeout, which made me get my pitch count really high and made me also walk too many guys because I just didn't like giving up hits. It was a psychological thing. They were right in identifying what the problems were results wise, but the solution to that problem was a Band-Aid. It wasn't. It was just something they had seen before, and it wasn't empirically based on anything. But that thing, and thank God analytics happened to us because that's not how my brain worked. I couldn't commit to it because I was like, I just don't think that's it. I just think that you feel that it is because you have very limited knowledge of what is possible. And that was frustrating at times, but they had more experience than me all the time. So I would always, and I'm a guy who's like, I'll try anything. So yeah, I messed around with it way, 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 way too much and had to learn the hard way and then take control of it myself.
Yeah, I think a little bit of a modern spin on that. I mean, I think a lot of it comes from Leo Mazzoni. I grew up with Leo Mazzoni and, establishing the fastball and low and away. And, some of that comes from really sort of base level analysis, which is that, low and away is not the greatest place for hitters. But if you establish the fastball low and away and you're constantly there, not only do the pitches not tunnel well off that. I mean, what do you tunnel well off of the fastball low and away? I guess, the slider further and lower and away, but not in the zone. And if you do it too often, you get the anticipation of the hitter, right? Just being like, oh, I'm going to be, especially lefties, that's why are lefties great at fastballs low and away, because they anticipate them. And that's why you have to sort of crowd them up. But I think the most modern understanding of establishing the fastball is which fastball, right? Because now we have pitchers that have 3 fastballs that are, have different fastball pairings and different pairings to each side of the plate. And I think one of you pointed this out in the pre-meeting. Sandy Alcantara, I think, is just a really great way to understand tunneling and understand establishing the fastball, understanding which fastball. So if you look at Sandy Alcantara from the right side, what does he throw? The sinker most often. Where does he throw? He throws a little bit high, honestly. He throws it high on righties' hands. Now, why is that? Because it's going to break in on their hands, and it's probably a terrifying pitch because it's coming at you 97 miles an hour with movement towards you. And it's coming in tight, So that's a great pitch. What does he play off of that? Well, let's say you lay off of that because that sinker has a bunch of movement towards you. And so you're like, sinker in, it's going to be in off the zone. I'm going to lay off it. Well, the four seam pairs off of that. The four seam will stay true and get you a called strike. So if you lay off and you're not swinging, four seam in. If you are swinging, oh, he's got you because he's got the changeup low off of that. And then he's got the slider and the sweeper, which tunnel off of that same spot and just land perfectly outside the zone. for a righty. I mean, it's just look at this visual and you're like, oh God, what do I do with this? If I'm swinging, he's got me with the slider and the sweeper and the change. If I'm not swinging, he's going to throw the four seam, you know? So either way, you're screwed. Now, of course, he's going to be a little bit weaker against lefties. And so here's his chart against lefties. And I put the four seam where he throws it most often against lefties, which is high and tight to them. Now the anchor pitch is the four seam. What does he play off of that? The changeup low and the back foot slider, which coming off the same tunnel will maybe look like the four seam for a little bit and then dive towards their feet. And so once again, he's got you. If you're swinging at that four seam, he can even throw the sinker off of that, but he can throw the change and the slider easily. If you're taking, he can throw he can throw the sinker and make sure it comes into the zone. So again, he can play the two fastballs off each other for called strikes and swinging strikes. And the movement patterns are great in terms of, being close enough that you think that, oh, that might be, is that the oh crap, it's a back foot slider, so that's the whole concept of tunneling. And, I saw some pushback that these tunneling relationships aren't always the same, and that you can't assume that because of these movement profiles are their average movement profiles, that they'll always be these profiles. But I do think that in terms, some of that's irrelevant in practice, because a hitter will be looking at these charts and be like, oh, okay, he's going to try to hit the four seam high, and then he's going to back foot the slider. So if they look even anywhere close to each other, you're going to get the hitter on, being reactive instead of aggressive. And the best is that, a reactive hitter to Sandy is going to hit ground balls. You have to be aggressive to get any of his breaking balls like out in front and lift him. So that's why he has so many ground balls, because this movement pattern is just going to make the batter sort of, it's going to saw him off most of the time, or take called strikes when the command is good. I think when the command was bad last year, that's where you saw, Sandy really struggle. And he gave up mostly a lot of singles and doubles rather than, having a big homer problem. It was singles and walks and, just batters being a little bit more comfortable because they could take certain parts of these tunneling and just cut them out and just be like, yeah, I can see that slider. It's no big deal. I'm not going to swing at it.
Yeah. By the way, too, not everyone is tunneling. Like, not everyone wants to use tunnels in this way, or like Sandy does. And Sandy has one of those situations, very similar, like kind of the DeGrom success. They're so good at throwing to one or two spots and so he's got two tunnels. He's got up and into lefties and up and into righties. And he just kind of stays like, that's my normal target. And then I just let all the pitches move within a realm of margin of error in those areas, and then that's how I get guys out. And a wrinkle can be go to the other tunnel for a pitch or something. Like you have the ability to do it. So, but he's got enough arsenal to do it. But to talk about the DeGrom stuff, they tunnel because their pitches don't really move a ton in a vacuum. They're not like crazy nasty pitches by themselves where you can just throw them over and over again. They're pitching, but they throw hard enough to where they don't really need, like, the decision to make, you have to make a decision so quickly that them being different is enough, and you get those really bad swings. So that is what they do really well. And Sandy, there's like a range that is quality. Like, you can have a pitch move too much, it deviates too early, so it's easy to identify. It just looks different than everything else. I had this problem with my slider for a really long time, to where I just could not get anyone to swing at it, even though in a vacuum it looked really good. It just looked different than everything else. So there are guys that are trying to tunnel, but their pitches aren't tunneling or can't tunnel because they have to start them in different ways to get them to go to different places. You've got a big curveball or whatever, you got to start it way up. It just looks different. And then there's guys like Clay Holmes, for example, has a terrible tunnel. Like, if you try to map his tunnels, they're bad because they move so much. All of his pitches move so much. So all of his pitches are great in a vacuum, but it makes it really hard to tunnel. So basically, him and like Logan Webb, another guy who does that, they try to end they find ways to end, or Michael King's another good example. They try to end the pitch at the same place. I call it reverse tunneling. No one else does. Or Shea Langolier said when he was with the Braves, they called it like a cross guy, where you want the pitches to cross pass and then end up at the same place. So the ball to strike to ball. You want to come off the plate, come back with a sinker, and then you want to start on the plate and throw the sweeper off of it. That's what Logan Webb does. So he picks a half of the plate, and then he does that, kind of swims the pitches back and forth. And that is how they are effective as well. And like Clay Holmes is like that too. So like, guys with really high movement profiles on everything they throw try to commit to that type of tunneling. And then guys who maybe have pitches that are closer in movement or not huge ranges in terms of, you still can have pretty good ranges, but you don't want crazy ranges so that they look similarly enough. They try to go with the anti-tunnel. And then the guys who really are struggling or like are inconsistent are usually just in between. They're trying to do one, it's not working as well, or they're trying to get to the other one and they're not quite effective there yet, and they have to change their arsenal up. I think a great example, we talked about it last week, Jake Irvin. His changes that he's making in order to go more east-west, he's trying to find a way to do either the anti-tunneling or the tunneling better so his pitches align better in that way. And then he's got to figure out empirically in real time on big league mounds what that looks like. And so, he got lit up by the Dodgers the other day, but like it does look better. Like it does look like he is on the right track and that we're going to see much more consistent versions of him. So he's going to be an interesting guy to watch to see how he kind of morphs into somebody who does this well.
We need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss an adjustment some pitchers are making to change their approach angle, and that's moving on the pitching rubber. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. There was something that came up this spring for the first time as something I don't think we've talked about on the show before. I know Lance Brazdowski did a breakdown of Paul Skeens coming out of LSU, moving on the rubber against hitters on different sides of the plate, right? And the idea is to create different approach angles, which changes the expectations and swing decisions of opposing hitters. It's a very big adjustment, it seems like, that some guys are making, and I think Eno or Trevor, maybe both of you guys noticed that Clay Holmes was doing that in the spring. Is that something that is limited in its effectiveness because only a certain number of guys can do it with good enough command, or is it something that more pitchers should be leaning on because it fits into this idea that it just completely re-racks the expectations of hitters by making one macro adjustment pre-pitch?
I'll take this one first. Historically, the moving on the rubber has been a good way for guys to, if they're struggling hitting a type of a spot. So for young guys, for me, it was always like, let's move 3 inches over the rubber because you're missing 3 inches off the plate all the time. So
you're basically just moving the heat map over.
Let's use your current approach angle that is comfortable to you, and it's your sights. That's there's a whole thing about that. The catcher looks different when you're slightly over there too. So there's adjustments you have to make as a pitcher. But as you get established, like Clay Holmes, once you get established and you have the command, then you can mess around with the angles. A great example of this was 2024, Sean Manaea doing the crossbody. He's got that crazy crossbody, and he could not get ball into righty. So they're like, let's, instead of trying to like straighten you out to get hit the spot more, let's go crazy with the angle so your brain has like completely changed so you can really feel the difference. And they started like throwing to the other rubber or the other mound when they warmed up, and he just figured it out and was just absolutely, and he had that great year. Like, he created a crazy horizontal approach angle. They went the other way. So this is what we're seeing happening. These guys who have natural feel, they're getting they're distracting them and being like, we're getting two benefits here. You're feeling the difference, so you can make the adjustment. And your body can feel the difference and get a new normal going. And we're creating an even bigger horizontal approach angle, which is discombobulating for a hitter because they're used to seeing. That's a part of deception. It's like you're subverting their expectations even more. So like you're getting two benefits. And I think that's what guys are trying to do more now with the veteran guys who are blatantly doing it and they don't care that the hitter sees them doing it. They're creating angles that it doesn't matter if I'm doing this angle. Now I have this different set of my pitches. You're going to react to my pitches differently, even if you know what I'm throwing and what the angle might be. You're still going to have to react differently because it's going to look different to you while it's coming. And that's what played it. And then a couple times he commanded the pitch so well that he just moved over. And then the assumption for the hitter, because the first time I saw it was, no, he's going to do something because he moved on the rubber. And then he just didn't. He just did the whole thing.
Yeah.
Did the same thing and just painted. And then you add, and then you throw that in. And now they're just like, it's like the equivalent of like, you get 2-0 on a guy, miss bad both pitches, and he's feeling comfortable, and you just throw a big slow curveball over, it's right down the middle. Now he's like 2-1, but you're like, I'll do that whenever. So now he's like, I'm it's 2-1, but I still don't feel like I'm in control like I just did. It's like that kind of thing in a long, like different way. So that's, I
Yeah.
think, what's happening. Yeah.
I keep hearing from you like a lot of something that fascinates me is like sort of these swing tendencies. Like is he in the swinging? Is he aggressive? Your example just now is the guy's like, well, you're all over the place. I'm gonna wait for you to hit a strike. Oh, lollipop curveball in, right? So the whole I think what's interesting about this is the idea of like, does this pitcher have an approach for swinging when the batter's swinging, and does he have an approach for when the batter is not swinging? And if you read, it's a piece called A Visual Primer on Horizontal Approach Angle by Alex Chamberlain on FanGraphs in 2023. There's a
Great
really
title.
good, yeah, really, just really grabs you. There's a finding in here that sharper approach angles toward the hitter correspond with higher swing rates on the inside edge and lower swing rates on the outside edge. And you can see that Will Warren has absolutely taken advantage of that. What he did was he moved to the right side of the right side of the rubber if you're looking from home plate, so the third base side of the rubber. And he throws 3 pitches to lefties now. It's a really funny grouping of 3 pitches because it's four seam, sweeper, and sinker. So that's 1 pitch that you would normally throw against lefties, and then 2 pitches that have really big platoon splits. So what does he want out of these pitches? Well, the four seamer he throws almost exclusively high and away. Now, if you think about it, he's moved to the third base side of the rubber, and Alex Chamberlain says that you get fewer swings on pitches on the outside part of the plate. He does not want you to swing in that four seam. It's not a great four seam. It's the Will Warren's pitch is the sinker, but it's a good enough four seam. And what he's doing is he's throwing it from an angle where the pitcher, the hitter thinks, that's ball. Oh, God, that was a strike. It's far away from him. He's on the third base side of the rubber as a lefty, and it stays true far away from him. It does not look like a strike for most of it until it's there. Now, okay, so that's when the batter's not swinging. You throw that four seam and you get that called strike. Now the batter's in an 0-1 count, or he feels like he has to protect, and maybe he's in a swinging count. What do you throw now? You throw the sweeper. Sweeper comes off of the same tunnel, according to this research, and it basically backfoots him. It's out of the strike zone. Oh, so he's swinging that pitch and it almost hits him, and you get a strike. You get more swings on that sweeper away. Now, if you get a guy who's like, oh, I want to take this the opposite way, and so he says anything that looks like it's coming in on me at all, I'm not going to swing at, because that's that sweeper coming in on me. I'm not going to swing at that. I'm only going to swing at things away, and I'm going to try and go the other way with them. That's a bad approach for Will Warren, because then he's going to take that four seam and spank it into left field for a double, right? Now you throw the sinker, which tunnels off that four seam, stays away, and stays further away. Now you got the guy reaching, and instead of a double the other way, it's just a squibber to the shortstop. So, you can kind of see the different approaches. I guess I get a little bit nervous when I see people ask me why Nolan McLean's Stuff Plus isn't bigger, and why he's the most, giftable guy out there. Like he's the pitching ninja all-star, where every time you see a video of Nolan McLean's pitches, you're like, God, could it move any more? But then you throw him up on this, and you're like, wow, if you put the sinker, where he tries to throw it high and tight to righties, no other pitch is in the zone, So and he does not have great command on that sinker. So if someone decides not to swing against Nolan McLean, he has to really have a different sight than his sinker. He has to throw the ball differently. He has to throw that curveball basically at the righty's head if he wants to throw it for a strike. Right? Like it has that much movement. So you can start to see how, and Stuff Plus will pick up on this. If you have a large shape, Stuff Plus will reduce the amount of swings you get on the pitch. And the larger the shape, the fewer swings you get. And so that reduces the amount of whiffs you can get. So Stuff Plus will penalize you sometimes for I've heard people refer to Stuff Plus as, oh, that pitch looks good. Sorry, that's not what stuff plus is. There could be pitches that look really good that don't score that well. And I'm not saying that Nolan McLean doesn't have good stuff. And maybe the model is underrating him currently because he does throw with high velocity and great movement. But you can see through this tool how that might create problems. Like basically, if someone decides not to swing at that sinker, nothing tunnels off of that into the zone.
That's interesting with McLean. He is a guy that I think came into the game last year as a rookie. Maybe a lot of guys hadn't heard about him like a ton, or maybe weren't aware. And he has
seen him.
Yeah, he has the like crazy movement in a tunnel or in a vacuum type of stuff. I have him as a guy who was going to regress a little bit because you get bull rush by how much this stuff is moving. But like you said, the more you see him, the more you realize like how different things look, the more like the different types of things he does. So like he probably operating just within I'm throwing to this target and then I'm going to tunnel everything off it way isn't going to be as effective as going with the Clay Holmes route or going with the Logan Webb route and working on getting the pitches to land in the same place. So it's a ball to a strike. So he's going to get more freezes. He should be looking for more freezes.
He gets to get more freezes.
And then getting the swings and misses, they're going to be chases off the like they just are, or they're going to be freezes. Like that is the way it's going to be. The only reason Logan Webb got so much swing and miss last year is because that changeup became a swing and miss pitch that was just below the zone or in the zone. He's getting that swings and misses in the zone more than any other pitch he throws because he just doesn't throw a sweeper in the zone. Like why would you? There's no reason to do it. So the only reason his strikeout rate was that high was because he was doing that. McLean does not have a changeup in that way. He is looking for one. I think he's going to find one eventually. But when he does, he's going to have to think about the X's. How do I use this edge and how do I use this edge? Coming back with the sinker, sweeper, curveball stuff, and then he's got to use the big pitches. Let them all look different out of the hand, and then have them land in different places. He has to think about it differently because he has so much movement. Like that's kind of the two schools of thought that are kind of separating, and then what we're seeing is there's guys who think of Dustin May. I was asked recently to look at like why does Dustin May like not have that much success? Why? Because all of his stuff plus is good. His location, his command's fairly good too. Like it's like there's no reason to be. What I think is he operates in a tunnel mindset when he's not a tunnel guy. I just think that his approach might be a little bit backwards. That's the only. I mean, I'm not certain about that. I still need to dig even deeper, but like it's starting to look like that a little bit. Like everything looks a little bit differently, and then he becomes very predictable. That is what Nolan McLean's got to avoid as well. And I think that there's going to be some growing pains this year. He's going to have some outings where they figure him out. Like he feels like he's figured out a little bit. It's because they're picking up on something because he hasn't quite locked that in. So that's what I'm paying attention with guys like that. It's kind of a theory, but like it's kind of based on my experience, like the best guys at that stuff that were good at, like Corey Kluber was a great example of a guy who did this, who constantly was coming back with the sinker and then throwing his big slider off of it. Like he was doing it before we knew what it really was. He wasn't necessarily tunneling as much as he was he being able to command those spots and using his move to come back to the spots and then deviating early in the path, then reconverging instead of diverging.
Yeah, I think another thing that's complicating this is that like, I'm putting the anchor for McLean, supposedly where it lands, right? But the tunnel is where he's aiming it, So it's like, if I put the sinker where he aims it, which would probably be if it's going to end up on the righty's hands, then the curveball's even further out, So yeah,
it's interesting because his straight pitch is very not straight. So it's like the anchor pitch kind of needs to be a four seam, to tunnel well. It kind of does. To like if you want to tunnel everything. But with Sandy throws a ton of four seam. Sandy's four seam, if you just take the pitch by itself, not very good. It's not a great, as four seams go, it's not a very good four seam. It's a dead zone four seam. He throws it because he has those other pitches that he actually wants to use to get people out. The four seam is to use the other pitches. He knows he can't just pump four seams and then strike guys out. It's just, that's what they're for. And then he's not going to get that. He also doesn't want fly balls. Neither thing that four seams give him are what he wants. He doesn't want any action in the four seams. He just wants to set up the other pitches that are going to get him the off the handle and off the end ground ball so he can throw complete games every single time. That's what he wants to do. So like that's the calculus happening. And McLean doesn't also have that either. He hasn't used the four seam to do that yet. But again, he's a young guy. Like he's gonna figure this out.
I'm not trying to use this to say that he's not going to be good. I just I wonder if maybe increased uses of the cutter, like Adam Ottavino always like wanted that gyro slider to be in between the two big pitches that he had. We also just know that like bigger movement pitches have bigger platoon splits, and so he needs to figure that out. So the cutter may end up being a really important pitch for him, or maybe it morphs into a gyro slider, whatever it is. Something that with less movement might actually be the way forward for McLean. And I don't know exactly how to use this yet to necessarily uncover sleepers or whatever, but I think it would be interesting if you were playing around with it to look at players that, for anybody in the Discord or anybody who wants to use this to try and analyze pitchers for fantasy purposes. I think it'd be useful to kind of think about what I was talking about with Cantillo and look at pairings other than fastball and look at, if you see some pitchers that are over producing, maybe they have a bad fastball, but they have two good secondaries. You can also look at some of these two changeup guys. We're starting to see more guys with, a splitter and a changeup, see how they're playing those two off each other, because maybe you throw one when they think the other's coming and you could play I'm pretty sure that Skeens plays the changeup and splitter off each other. And, it's kind of a Japanese thing that you see guys doing. Foster Griffin, by the way, has a changeup and a splitter. And I think he plays them off each other. I think Foster Griffin would be somebody that you should look at on this page just to kind of explore, because he has it's like 8 pitches. So how is he playing those pitches off each other? And I think the one thing that I would like to see on this tool is a little bit of a nod towards how it's actually used. I don't know if it's another heat map or something on this page, but what I ended up doing was looking a lot at the Savant page and being like, where does he actually throw it? Okay, I'm going to use that as the anchor point for Nolan McLean's sinker, and then I'm going to look at how everything plays off of that. So, I would love to have, a thing on here that just shows his actual usage so that I could anchor it in the different spots. Like, why does, like example, why does Joey Cantillo throw high sliders? Well, when I put the anchor point for the slider there, the curveball is at the bottom zone. Oh, look, he throws the curveball there. And so he's going to get whiffs on the curveball if he throws the high slider, And so it makes you understand pitches better. And I think potentially it is a little bit of a blind spot for Stuff Plus, because Stuff Plus does not do a lot with the interactions between secondaries. And the wider pitchers' arsenals gets, in the game, and the more they are, the more hitters are anticipating certain pitches and certain counts, the more you can play secondaries off of each other, unless it becomes just a tunnel off the fastball.
What's also interesting about Cantillo is by far the pitch he commands the best, at least by the model, is the slider. It's got a 117 location plus. I think everything else is below a 95. That four-seamer has a 74 location plus. So the importance of having slider command when you don't have fastball command seems like it'd be really high up there, just in terms of something that keeps you alive as a pitcher. Just a really odd combination of things that Cantillo's doing, but maybe some explanations for how it's actually working. We have one more quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss a topic that Ben Lindbergh wrote about recently. Is there too much information available to players on the field? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. There was a piece that Ben Lindbergh wrote a few weeks ago at The Ringer. It's been on our rundown, I think, 3 Thursdays in a row now, and it's finally going to be discussed. A great headline: keep MLB front offices away from the field. And it kind of digs into this question of where is the line for the amount of information players should be carrying with them on the field. Like, we've seen the cards for positioning. We've seen Blake Snell do that. We've seen wristbands, all sorts of different ways that you can just have some extra info with you. And a big part of Ben's argument is that you spend enough time planning, prepping, ahead of time that you don't necessarily need to have everything with you on the field, especially in an era where you've got tablets and all that information waiting for you in the dugout. Like you could look every half inning when your team's hitting, you could be looking into some stuff that you want to bring with you back onto the field without actually physically carrying it with you. So starting with that, Trevor, do you feel like we've reached the point where we've crossed past the threshold of the amount of information? Has it gone too far? Should there be some things in terms of rules, limitations, guardrails in place to reduce the amount of on-field information players have at their disposal?
I think we might be approaching that time. I don't know. I have always been in the education space, like you want to limit the number of open book tests you have. If every test is open book, no one will learn anything, and they won't have to. It's a major problem with like AI now, right? So I think that there is also an important thing around like the player's mind should be something that they can gain an advantage with. And if we're just taking it away, like at what point then is it just guys with now physical talent being dictated by the dugout is what is valuable? That's going to have sweeping implications for players, and it's boring. Sorry. It's just like, if you never have to think, that's boring. And I would never want to play that game. I understand some guys are like, I love to be bored and just have to go out and make money. But like, that something is taken away there, and like it's for entertainment stories anyway. Like it's the story of the game that we all like. That's what baseball is for. That's why it exists. Wouldn't exist otherwise. So at what point are we sacrificing some of that for efficiency? We're getting pretty close, especially with like the calling pitches from dugout thing that's happening as well. Like my whole thing here is, if it starts as training wheels, because one hard thing as a young guy, and I struggled with it myself, is like really getting confident in the decisions you're making at the big league level while you're in it. And if you're not being given the space to make decisions and like internalize that this is my decision, I got to live and die with it, there is a value to that that you then build confidence with, and confidence is everything in baseball. So like, if you're not making the decision, or you don't understand why the decision is being made and not learning that stuff, and you're just doing what's being told, which is what it's going to happen with a lot of young guys, because it's yes sir, may have another, you're a good little soldier anyways. Like that's just naturally what you're coming up with. You're just like, I'll shut up and do my job so that you leave me in the big leagues. Like that, the chances guys just do that, if you let them do that, then when the day comes they have to make decisions on their own, they're going to be lost. And that is something that is not something that anyone should want. And it doesn't really represent how good of a player can be, because at the end of the day, they have to be able to make decisions about their own careers. And like, they already do it in the weight room. They do it in whether or not they're hurt or not. Like, they're the only ones who can tell you clearly what's going on with them. And so they need to understand why decisions are being made. But if that's how it's being approached, now I don't know if that is how it's being approached. Probably not for everybody. It's really hard logistically to do this. But like, hey, we're gonna guide you, but we want you in this room. We want you understanding where all these pitches are coming, so that someday, using the pitch calling as an example, someday you're getting the pitch from the catcher. You know it's from the dugout, but it's also the pitch you would have chosen, or you understand why, because you discussed it. You were there in the meeting. You weren't checked out, and then that is what you want. So as long as that is the goal for the catcher as well, Agustin Ramirez with the Marlins, who we've seen his defense. There's got a lot of work that needs to be done there. If taking away pitch calling for a while he works on that and improves on it, and then phasing that more in so that he can improve one thing at a time while being in the big leagues for a team that wasn't supposed to be super good right away. If that is the goal, if that is development, then I love that. But if we're just going to keep the bumpers up so no one knows what a gutter ball feels like, that will make the game a worse product long term, and it'll be a worse experience for the players, the fans, and everyone involved.
And I think we know which one it's going to be, because we can look to youth baseball, where there's already been sort of an influx of overcoaching, where you very rarely see two coaches leave their players alone to just play a game and figure out what the mistakes were and where they should have been, and maybe lose to learn. Like I love the gutter ball analogy, and we're seeing that already in youth baseball, and this is a little bit of that creeping into the major leagues. And I think that once everyone becomes comfortable with this, it'll become the new norm. Now, someone brought up in the Discord, hey, why isn't this like football? In football, the quarterbacks used to call the plays, and now it's pretty much the OC, and the offensive coordinator is going to have a better sense of which plays to call, and but they still have audibles, I guess. But I think you're right. Like, how good are those audibles going to be? How good is that quarterback's thinking going to be in terms of his ability to improvise beyond the actual gameplay, which is, that's the beauty of sport for a lot of us, is that like things happen that we never anticipated. And so like we want these players to like do something brilliant. I think of like Javi Baez's, tags, and maybe the flip play for Jeter, or like these moments where like, the player, takes something that looks like it's almost disastrous and turns it into something great, or just does something superlative that wasn't part of the plan. Those are always my favorite parts. Takes risks.
Like risks. Risk will go away. That's the risk. Yeah. So we just won't take any risk and nothing cool will happen.
Will a model tell you to throw like 8 straight sweepers, right? Would a player see like, oh man, he's got no chance on these. I'm gonna keep. He can keep cheating to that sweeper, and I'm gonna get him. I think I was watching a game recently where a guy just threw 5 straight sweepers to get a guy out. Would the model tell you to do that? Would it tell you to throw a sinker when the pitcher, and would the pitcher that grew up in the the model the model tells me what to throw and I throw it, would he say, no, I'm going to shake to sweeper here because this guy has no chance? I think I agree with Ben Lindbergh. I think we should keep, the outfielder, placement charts. We should take those out. I would like to ban calling pitches from the dugout. As much as that excites me as an R&D guy and as an analyst, the stuff that we could do potentially with that, I would rather leave that in the players' hands. I want to throw a question back to you, like, could we effectively ban calling this? Because it's just signals. I think that you had a good answer to this, Trevor, when we were talking about this earlier. How would you ban giving signals from the dugout for pitch types?
Well, the big thing is the catcher has the wristband on, so they have this big grid. So it's just really easy to do. So instead you just make it hard to do, so there's skill involved with actually communicating what you want and when you do it. Like, there's nothing keeping the dugout from, like, for me as a pitcher being like, here's these 2 situations where this pitch might be better and I tend to go to this pitch. Like, we're just identifying a tendency I have that is hurting me, and then they have a signal to be like, think about it, we're doing it, remember, we're going to throw this pitch, and they just give me a thing. Like, why not? Like, that's a good strategy move, that kind of thing. But instead of it just being an autopilot, like 2-4 or A2, yeah. Boom. You're just checking notes that you also didn't write. So
you also get sign stealing, though. If you take that card away, then they're going to go back to regular signs where they're like 2 inside, and like,
yeah,
can everybody see those?
That's like, maybe that's another, they have to have the skill on the other side to do that. I mean, I totally understand, like, where now it's harder now with what we're trying to crack down on. So it's either none, coaches need to be able to affect the field too. Like, it's not like we can't say, you guys can't do anything. Like, so in terms of pitch calling, I don't think there is a way really to effectively at the moment, like right off the top of my head, outside of maybe just making it part of the pitch comm where there's a 3-way thing going. They have a little control.
Or just making it harder. I like what you're saying. Take the cards off the catchers.
Try to make it a little harder. The guys in the outfield, if we want to change that, like, they used to do signals and show. Like, it's also doesn't need to be a secret if we're moving you. Like, you're moving. We can see you moving. So like that doesn't need to be a secret. Maybe the guys just have to pay attention and look in, and we just, like, you don't just get to pull a card out of your back pocket. So there's, like, you have to pay attention. Like, that's It's just a little bit harder. There's a slight barrier to entry, so their mistakes can still be made. I just think it's the solve game problem the NBA is coming with. They're all just laying it in or shooting threes. Mid-range jumpers gone. It's because statistically those are the best shots to take. But you know what that turns into? A super boring game where everyone's either tanking or winning. And that is what the NBA has become. They're having a huge problem with it because the NBA has got less outcomes than baseball does. And the more we consolidate the number of things that happen in the game, the more boring it's going to be, and the more pitch clocks we're going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. The types of restrictions will be, more like that. And just kind of thinking about the problem-solving aspect of this, if you imagine a typical player having their best stuff at the beginning or early on in their career and then losing velocity, losing movement over time, typical arc, if you can't problem solve, do you have a second half of your career? Guys is going to burn out in 3 to 5 years and not have the 10, 15-year careers where, hey, you were this guy at the beginning and you were this guy in the middle and then you were this guy at the end, but all three of those versions of you were actually pretty good players because you did solve problems and learn how to make adjustments, right? Like I think that's probably what you lose in the long run if you take more and more decision-making away from the players over time. I think that's your end game cost.
Think about how heady Max Scherzer is. Like, think about how different, like you're just saying, think about how different Zach Greinke was when he was drafted as a fastball slider guy and ended as a guy who was throwing the Felix Hernandez changeup like half the time. Think about Clayton Kershaw coming up as a fastball curveball guy, discovering the slider, and at the end of his career, throwing an 89-mile-an-hour four-seam, an 88-mile-an-hour slider, and 80%, 90% of the time, and still making it work. So
Clayton Kershaw would have been out of baseball 6 years ago if this were the norm. Like they would have just been going. Like that's what would have happened because he's just like he couldn't stay healthy either. Like he just wouldn't been given the opportunity. My career would have been way shorter. We won't have another Max Scherzer. Like Max Scherzer would be told to go home. Just Verlander would be told to go home years ago. Maybe not years ago. Verlander's been pretty good, but like maybe going into last year, he's not getting that job. They're just gonna be like, we got a 23-year-old that we can just tell what to throw, who's got better stuff than you right now, and that's
right.
The way it is. Like, and then not only that, with that in mind, when that happens, they're just gonna ride the guys till the brakes fall off because they're like, we're just gonna replace you in 4 years anyways. So like, might as well get every ounce out of you as possible. And like I said, young guys are like, I'm just happy to be here. Yes, sir, may I have another? Yes, I will. I will pitch for the Guardians, and I will throw 88 games out of the bullpen every single season.
So you mentioned a 23-year-old. We have a soon-to-be 23-year-old in Miami. Yuri Perez will be 23 next week. And what he's already done as a big leaguer, it's 202 and 2/3 big league innings, 3.82 ERA, 111 WHIP, almost 28% K rate. A good pitcher, right? He's off to a great start to his career overall. This season's been a little bumpy, and even the return from TJ, we've talked a lot about the road struggles with homers in particular. It makes me think about a player like Yuri when a team like the Marlins is going about their business this way, because I wonder if it limits him from reaching his full ceiling. Is there any evidence of that happening at this point? I don't have any. I'm just asking it as more of an open-ended sort of question. But when you start looking at the command struggles of Yuri in particular, do you think that an approach like what the Marlins are using right now is already going to help try and circumvent a problem for immediate results without actually solving and building and teaching Yuri Perez how to get better with what has been the league's best stuff so far? It's wild to me that if you look at location plus numbers for the young season, only Joe Boyle is worse with an 87. Yuri has an 88 right now. But if you look at the stuff numbers, Yuri is tied with Tarek Skubal for the best stuff in baseball through these first few weeks of the season. So are the Marlins doing him in particular a disservice with an approach like the one that they're using, which they believe is going to make their pitchers perform better over time? So what they care about is run prevention in the immediate future. They're not thinking about Yuri Perez, guy who very likely pitches somewhere else once he eventually reaches free agency.
I got to say right out of the gate, up until about last time I checked 2 days ago, the Marlins were first in whiff rate in the league, and they were 23rd in the league last year. So that was the direct. I believe the minors, when they going into last year when they tested this all the way to the minors, they were 16th, then they were first in whiff. So like they're hunting swings and misses but which is working, especially for guys that like don't usually hunt swing and misses in Yuri Perez and Sandy Alcantara, and they're getting more swings and misses. So it works. But I think that there's two ways this can go. One, he can improve his command because he doesn't have to be like, is this what I should throw? Because I don't really know. And Gustin definitely doesn't know. So like you just don't have confidence there. I know for a fact, through my experience, if I'm not confident in the spot and I'm not confident that the catcher is confident in the spot, the chance I hit the spot are almost zero, which makes my command worse. So maybe removing that gives him confidence immediately. And if that happens, then it immediately bumps up his command. Then as he does that longer, he starts to intuit the decisions being made because he's seeing the patterns. He's just naturally doing it. That might be what they're counting on. There's a chance that works. Now, you better be like directly reinforcing that as well. If you attach them both, I think it's a great way to teach. But if you don't, and guys are going to get lost in this, like some guys are just not going to get both, and they are going to get left behind. That's the danger. But with Yuri Perez, maybe that is what they're hoping happens because you mentioned Tarek Skubal and stuff. So guys with great stuff, you see flashes of brilliance, and then they're super inconsistent. Also the opposite, right? You see guys with really good command, they're really consistent, but maybe you never see those peaks or those really incredible outings happen either. Kind of like maybe Brian Wu, right? He's good every time, but is he ever like punching out 14? No, he's not. He's punching out 4 or 5, and he's getting through 7 innings. So, but when you get both location plus command and stuff, you get Tarek Skubal. You dominate all the time. Yuri Perez has that potential if he can add location plus. So if they can teach him how to build confidence in those spots and then intuit and understand why they're throwing them there and then commit to them, that will mean that he will benefit long-term. But if they don't, and this stuff doesn't lock in, and this obviously was going to vary wildly based on the guy. Some guys just can't retain it very well. And some guys can, and maybe they learn different ways. Everyone learns different ways. That's what's the interesting part because everyone's going to need something different to reinforce it. We're going to have to wait and see. But I think that's the potential. It could either be amazing and he turns into Sandy Alcantara, or it could be the opposite. It could be either one, and that's what kind of concerns me a little bit.
And it's the same thing the Brewers are going to be dealing with Jacob Mizorowski, by the way. This is not just a Marlins question or a Marlins problem. It's just they're the entry point to wondering what the cost of this could be. Sorry,
Yeah, but I mean, with Jacob Mizorowski, on some level, he's still thinking for himself. He's interacting with his catcher. He can shake his catcher off. He's got some agency in the game. And I think of Max Scherzer again, where he always talked about miss patterns and missed distances and good misses. He didn't think that he had plus command, but he knew where his misses were. And how do you learn where your misses are? You learn with mistakes. You learn with repetition. You learn with sometimes throwing a suboptimal pitch. That's what I'm worried about, is that the model will spit out the optimal pitch every time. And can you put in missed distance and miss patterns? Maybe, yeah, you could put that in the model, but will you put in the learning that, can improve a pitch? Knowing how that pitch failed will teach you how to make that pitch better in the future. And, if you model out everything to be successful, you don't get that. The one thing I disagree with you, Trevor, is you said there's different ways to learn. I think that's generally true, but the biggest way that I think we all learn from is failure. You're like, oh, that didn't work. And then why didn't that work? And what do I need to do differently so that it works better next time? That is a little bit missing. If I'm just giving you, oh, this is the pitch that's most likely to work over and over and over again. I'm not giving you the pitch that's like, well, this is the pitch that most likely teach you something really important that you might learn that might make you a way better pitcher next year, or next start.
As long as you can understand this is most likely to work. As long as you're like, okay, why does it think that's most likely to work? And then when it doesn't work, why did it not work? As long as those answers, you can still find those answers, even if the model's telling you or not. And then you can ask somebody and they can give you that information. As long as that still exists, then I think that is the best way to approach this way. But the problem is, based on what I know, I would have to ask that stuff. And when I even had to ask it in the past, no one was really clear in asking it. I didn't know it was already a problem and we weren't even calling the pitches. So I doubt that it's going to be dialed in right out of the gate.
This is the dirty little secret of today's analytics, is that these models are black box. And I mean, maybe it's not even a dirty little secret. Maybe it's, everyone knows this. I mean, there's people that are frustrated about Stuff Plus. I get it. But what we're trying to do, and I think more teams should do this, is we're trying to train an AI to ask the model itself why it came up with this result and give us a plain language answer. And so it's kind of crazy that we have to train a machine to ask a machine why it said what it said.
That is right.
But because
so
these
we can internalize it, yeah.
Because it's AI and because it's machine learning and because it's black box, you sometimes have to train a machine to tell you, oh, his Stuff Plus is not as good because of X, Y, and Z in the model. And like, so that, you know, why do we call this? Like, maybe you could create a little report of like, why did we call these 4 pitches in this game? Well, you know, we've got a plain language report that tells you because, you know, batters in this tendency and these counts, you know, did this or whatever against pitchers like yours or whatever it is, you know. It might be interesting to create a report like that for after the game because, you know, hey, what if you're Yuri Perez and they call this pitch Homer and they call this other pitch Homer, and then after the game you're like, dude, what the hell? Like, why am I going to listen to the model if it's just going to tell me to throw pitches that to turn into homers? And then you could have a report that in plain language says, you know, this is why we called it, and this is why the result was there. You know.
Same thing with how shifting used to be. Pitchers be like, why are we shifting you over there? Like, I'm throwing a single, you know, like if it's like, if it feels like it's out of your hands, it's hard to trust it. So as long as the trust is being built somehow, that is what we're looking for. We want a guy to trust what's happening. And the best way to do that is for them to make the decision, them to know what happened was, and then them to make the adjustment. That's the easiest way to get them to trust what they're doing. And that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. So, but if that is factored in, then I think it could potentially be faster and more efficient in teaching them. But if it's not, because there's a lot of guys, a lot of people to talk to, a lot of different personalities, a lot of guys need different things in different places. It's just simply not happening as well as it should right out of the gate. There's no way it is, but it could. And I hate to say this because I was an ex-player. Sometimes you just make sure that your 5 best guys are getting that and they're getting the resources they need to because they are your best players. You're going to lean on them anyways. Your presence
if they're good leaders, that'll broadcast. Then you know you watch Max Scherzer, you see how much information he takes in and what kind of information he takes in. You're on some level going to be like, well, I want to be like Max when you know be 10 years from now. I want to still be in the game, you know. So let me follow along and see what he's doing.
It's not easy to implement it and to implement it well, but the success they're having, that's a great call out that they've moved to the top of the league in whiffs after being nowhere close to the top of the league a year ago.
Also, top 10 in barrels allowed. I'm just saying.
Well, that's what happens when whiff goes up. Oh, hey, called strikes and whiffs too. They went to third in the league. That was 2 days ago. It might have changed now, but
it's still true. Still true.
They're up there too. Yeah.
Well, we need to go. We failed at a goal we had for today's episode miserably, but we landed the plane exactly where it always lands. I think the average show length with the 3 of us is right around 66 minutes of runtime before the ads. We hit that right on the head again today. If you got questions about today's episode, you want to mess around with those tools, let us know how you're using them. You can do that using the Discord. Click on the link in the show description to get in there. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.